The sky of Sanctis Ferrum opens with a clean, surgical sound, like glass sculpted under a white-hot wire. Over Hive Basilica, where cathedral spires spear a permanent twilight and manufactorum roofs smoke like censers, a seam of light unzips the firmament. Vox towers stutter. The crowd goes still. Pilgrims kneel and draw a double-headed bird on ash-smudged chests. Medici sirens flare and then falter as every needle, every auspex wand, every counting machine reaches for an explanation and fails to find one. Through the seam, something small descends, not falling, but choosing. Heat blooms. Vapor trails peel like petals. He touches down on the governor's palace balcony, scuffing the black obsidian veneer with a bare foot and a grin that looks wildly out of place in a city carved for fear. He is lean, spiky-haired, orange-clad in rough fabric that might as well be a banner against this world's armored palette of gunmetal and gold. The guard captain levels a halberd muzzle. The newcomer tilts his head. A second later, the halberd is in the captain's hands again, only now it is unloaded and the power cell sits neat and warm in the stranger's palm. Hi, I'm Goku," he says, like offering water. The palace auspex lattice pings threat and paradox simultaneously. The lone figure is a null for no law they understand, and a flare for all of them. "Stand down," the governor says, voice raw from endless briefings. She is a thin woman with iron in her posture and a braid like a whip down her back. If he wanted us dead, we'd be dead. She looks to the other figure in the room, who has been a shadow long enough to forget light. An inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus, masked in parchment and machinery. A Rosarius winking with caged lightning. "Magos, mark this moment," the governor says to the augur staff humming by the door, then gestures. "You came at a..." Air quakes. The sky answers the wound with another. Translation storms chew the horizon, and ships like teeth grind reality into crumbs. The Vox channels scream with kill codes and prayer. A warp space bloom flowers scarlet above the ash wastes beyond the hive. Its petals are ships. Its pollen is drop pods. Goku looks up, and the good humor falls away like a cloak. "People are going to get hurt," he says, mostly to himself. He steps off the balcony and hangs there. Gravity briefly a suggestion he refuses. Then he is gone. He streaks across the hive like a thrown star. A commuter train buckles on a warped rail. He's there, under it, lifting with careless gentleness, setting steel down inches from children and vendors who do not drop their baskets because their hands have locked around hope like a handle. A reactor interchange blows out a heat haze ball of shrapnel. He is there, hands up, palms soft, and the fragments bow to him and flow like stream water around his wrists to bury themselves harmlessly in concrete. An administratum wing shears off its moorings. He rises under it and lays it back on its sockets in 3 exact movements, as if returning a stubborn drawer to a desk. Macro batteries along the hive rim cycle up and then cough to stillness as their target profile scrambles. The first wave of invaders tears through atmosphere, armor glowing, demonic sigils pulsing like ulcers. Goku meets the first drop pod mid-fall, taps its nose with 2 fingers, and the pod stops as if embarrassed to be moving so fast. He plucks it open. The things inside are wrong in angles and intent. He holds the pod out and snaps the hinge with a thumb. The wrong things rush him, and he is already between them, striking not to break, but to end a motion with no continuation. The monsters fold like paper figures who remember how to be flat. On the palace balcony, the governor watches the city survive in defiance of arithmetic. The Inquisitor's eyes are small and bright behind the mask. "You will talk to him," the governor says. "I will interrogate him," the Inquisitor replies. The first wave dies in curated silence. Collateral is a rumor with no evidence. On the palace landing pad, the newcomer returns with soot on his cheek and an odd little laugh under his breath, as if he has found a familiar rhythm under a strange song. "Name's Goku," he repeats, and then he points at the sky where the seam widens again, grossly, greedily. "That's not done. Neither are we." the governor says. I am Governor Valeria Holt. You saved millions. Saving people's what I do. And why? The Inquisitor steps forward. Chains etch along his coat like annotations. He is the kind of man who pronounces 3 words as if they're warrants. Why are you here? Goku scratches the back of his neck. There was a, how do I put this? Tear. I was fighting someone who wanted to swallow my world in dark, sticky stuff. Next thing, I smelled smoke and fear. I came. The simplicity is a shape no one in this room has seen in years. It is almost threatening. Faith is not naivety, the Inquisitor says. Mercy kills worlds. Goku blinks. Not where I'm from. Where you're from doesn't exist here. The War Council convenes in a sanctum, with walls the color of dried blood, and the sky painted across the ceiling so that it is always dawn somewhere. Hololithic maps show the hive like a heart. Arteries of transit pulsing. Capillaries of habstacks leaking heat. Macro cannon arcs trace in chalk. Regiments are little blue chips, stamped with unit prayers. Litanies run down the side of the map, pleading for machine spirits to not miscount. First wave repelled, the Admiral intones, his voice scarred like alloy. Your asset was decisive, he adds, tripping on gratitude. Second wave will not be so naive, the Inquisitor says. They do not repeat failures. They escalate. They use the wound he opened by being here. I didn't open it, Goku says, shrugging. I followed it. Consequence is function, not intention. The governor keeps her eyes on both men. We need him. He limits collateral damage. He saves lives. And he binds us to a theology we do not practice, the Inquisitor says. In this Imperium, survival is obedience. Mercy is treason. Wearing a smile. Goku exhales. A quiet sound. You win by surviving. I get it. But you survive to live. If all you do is survive, you forgot the point. Tell that to the dead, the Inquisitor says. Gently enough that it hurts more. Alarms bloom, the hololith hiccups, and then resolves into a shape that makes everyone's teeth ache, even when they are not touching. A vessel like a thorned crown pushes out of the wound. It is not simply in space. It is insinuated into the idea of the city. Choirs of astropaths begin to bleed at the eyes miles away. On every Prometheum altar, the candle flames kink and shiver backward. The Admiral grips the table. Designation? Warp ship. Unknown pattern. Signature. Corruptive, the Mago says. The word is half scientific, half prayer. It projects a pressure, an anti-energy. Goku's head tips. He sees it before the hololith does. Feels Kai suddenly behave like winter water. Thick and unwilling. When the ship opens like a mouth, the thing that steps out is not a thing, but a proposition in armor. A champion descends on wings that are knives, and is carried on a wind that is crowd noise inverted into a tone no throat should make. Its blade drinks the light around it, and leaves a line after it sweeps, as if time takes longer there. A mask grins without lips. A voice arrives not by air, but by the sick route of thought. Savior, it whispers in 1,000 broken syllables. You are beloved of the lie that all life is a meal that can be eaten slowly. Lay down your hands. We will show you a faster way to the truth. When Goku meets it above the Basilica spire, he does not lead with talk. He tests. A straight punch to center mass, conservative pour, respectful speed. It lands. The champion slides backward on air, armored feet carving invisible trenches. Goku does not smile. He follows. The champion's blade hisses and carves a thin line across Goku's forearm. Blood rises, smart and red. He stops. He should not be bleeding. He looks at the cut and sees the edge fizz around it with a kind of black snow. The sword laughs without sound. The blade is an idea sharpened against countless prayers. Negation, tuned to warp. It cuts stories as much as skin. Okay, Goku says, squarely to himself. And then he fights like he is listening. He pulls the champion away from the tower, away from the macro battery nests. They clash over the ash wastes, far enough from the hive that the only witness is the old soil itself, baked and tired. Goku keeps the battle in a tight envelope, compressing sound with bursts of air, turning shocks away from stray pilgrim columns by the smallest of angle shifts. It is a lesson he once learned on worlds softer than this. Power means you narrate the room, and the room sometimes includes miles. The blade whispers when it touches him. It doesn't simply cut, it offers. Your strength is hunger. It purrs, and there is never enough. I will fill you until you are done. Goku parries with forearms and elbows, letting the edge whisper against callus and bone, tasting the thought without swallowing it. He answers with combinations fast enough for the eye to mistake them as a single coherent motion. The champion laughs through a broken voice box. The laugh hurts the wind. A strike lands wrong. The sword finds his side, sliding through ki like a heresy slips through a vow. Goku feels heat go cold, and something else moves under his skin like a memory. He staggers, recovers, takes space. The whisper grows louder, no longer coy. Why fight for lives that choose chains? Why carry their weight? Let the strong be strong, and the weak be ornament. Lay down the old optimism. Pick up what works. Images arrange themselves in his head with borrowed colors. Worlds saved that later, burned anyway. Enemies spared, who learned only to bury their lessons. The whisper lays out a line of logic, like stones across a river. Accept the world as it is. Stop pretending it can be more. He could end this all by ending everything that isn't him. The thought is not tempting because of power, but because of relief. No more having to convince anyone. No more weight of hope. The Inquisitor's gun speaks from far below. Faith rounds, sanctified, crack the air like knuckles. Silver streaks cut up toward the champion, not to hit, but to interrupt the texture of the pressure. On the walls of Basilica, wards flare, and choir boys who have never seen real battle lift voices they didn't know they had. It is not a deus ex machina. It is a stubborn chorus of no. The Sisters of Silence arrive like a closing hand, nulls wrapped in pale cloaks, their very presence shivering the warp like a horse tossing its head. The pressure drops by a fraction. A fraction is enough. Goku steps into the fraction with everything he is. The punch is clean. It does not savor. It does not learn. It simply lands. The champion's chest caves just enough to make the armor uncertain whether to scream or hold. The blade flickers, briefly losing its thread of not light. Goku does not try to break the sword. He breaks the arm that thinks it owns the sword, cleanly at the joint, then moves the battle sideways into a band of desert the sisters have cordoned with their quiet. The champion looks smaller inside his armor for the first time. Then the world tilts in a way that is not physical. Choirs cut out mid-note, as if someone pinched the world's nose. The champion's broken limb blossoms a second limb of shadow and goes to stab without any time passing between idea and execution. Goku's body chooses before he does. He takes the stab with his palm, sees his own hand pierced, sees blood and not light share a space and not fight, and realizes he cannot feel his ki where it should be in that hand. It is like a limb fell asleep in a room he cannot walk into. He makes a choice. He lets it go. He treats one hand as gone. He uses the other like a question mark. He wins. He does not kill. He breaks the champion's mask, and under it there is a face that is not a face but a collage of other faces. A mirror held up to every time he had seen someone choose power and forget why they wanted it. He lowers the broken shape to the sand, and the sisters take it with clinical contempt. The blade hisses and gnashes at irregular intervals, frustrated to have no owner. It does not stop whispering. It will never stop. That is its function. After, he sits on the edge of the basilica roof and lets the medici-techs clean the wounds they cannot truly understand. The governor watches the city breathe and counts fires that are dying rather than multiplying. The Inquisitor stands at a solemn slant, hands in sleeves. You refused the shortcut. he says. It is not praise. It is a notation. It wasn't a shortcut, Goku says. It was a dead end, with good advertising. We will require you to come to Terra, the Inquisitor says, as if changing topics, but not really. To the throne. You have touched the Immaterium by name. You have bled. You will be judged for what you are. Judged? Sure. Goku flexes his left hand. Feeling is starting to return, like a tide. Is this a trial? Everything is a trial. This one has pageantry. The voyage is a cathedral pretending to be a ship. Hull plates are stamped with prayers. The chapel nave has more mass than a fast frigate. The navigator is a woman whose head hums when she is quiet. Goku walks the Mediki decks with a strip of orange giite tied around his hand and listens to the way pain moves in a place designed to keep you alive, just enough to suffer. He spends time with a chaplain who buffs his Crozius as if it is a relic that remembers better times, and with a Palatine who chants her faith like a drill routine. They watch him punch invisible lines in the air and nod as if they are seeing a new litany added to an old list. You smile too easily, the chaplain says, not unkindly. You frown too hard, Goku says with the same warmth. Pain teaches. So does joy. The Palatine eyes him over a helmet, cradled like a sleeping hawk. You fight clean, she says. You keep the battle in a cup instead of a flood. Floods kill crops, he says. In mid-transit, a thing arrives that looks too much like him. Not the face, not the voice, but the premise. A silhouette hangs off the porthull at a distance impossible to maintain in the warp without permission. It wears black and carries a memory of a staff and a crueler memory of a smile. Its hair is wrong in a way that makes the navigator retch. The Vox picks up only one sentence. You spend yourself on them, it says. They will spend you in return. Try the efficient way. Become the last necessary tyrant. The chaplain's knuckles go white around his Crozius. The Palatine's eyes harden into 2 coins of war. Goku floats out to meet the shape, not on a scooter or in a bubble, but as himself, because he trusts what he is more than what anyone builds. This foe is not a demon. It is the idea of him, edited. It fights the way he has sometimes wanted to fight on his worst days. Preemptive, punishing, perfect. Their clash does not make big noises. It is a conversation in hits. Goku feels something like ultra instinct tug in his bones, the old reflex to become cold and precise and gone. He refuses that too now. He chooses to remain warm and present, and there, which is harder. The shadow pauses because it has not rehearsed this. A light crawls up the hull behind it, not a weapon, but a sign. An aquila, shaped by 1,000 little fires in 1,000 little viewing bays, where sailors have set match to wick. The shadow's edges go soft when the sign passes over it. It withdraws. It isn't beaten. It is denied. That will have to do. They reach Terra, and the pilgrim routes around the planet are choked and glorious. The palace sits like a commandment given the shape of a mountain. Gold is everywhere. And in this place, gold is not ostentation, but armor. The custodes stand at posts as if no time has elapsed between breaths. Null maidens drift like winter in squads of 3. Goku is stripped of his weapons without having to be asked, which is easy, because he has none. He keeps his orange robe and the scuffed boots and the rope belt, which are more scandalous than a sword would be. The audience is a room the size of a continent, and the god on the chair is a thought in a machine that will not let go. Silence has mass. It bends the shoulders of the proud. The exchange is not words in air. It is a pressure applied to bone until bone pays attention. It is a vision placed directly on the inside of the mind, like paint on glass. What do you think life is? Sun who falls from wounds in the sky. A chance to be good. He answers without style. A chance to try again. How many chances? The throne asks. Not cruelly. As many as it takes, until the trying becomes a habit, and if trying, endangers the species. Then the species does not deserve to be a word on a flag. It has to be a practice, a day-to-day. The throne shows him 3 roads like rivers running under different moons. The first is a return. He sees his own world, his own fields, his own table, the shine of oil on a pan, and the laughter of a child. He feels the memory of this place begin to thin like breath on glass. He tastes the relief of being unburdened and the guilt twinned to it. The second is a free agent path. He sees himself do what he always does, unbound by edict, saving here, saving there, refusing to salve one wound if the salve demands another wound somewhere else. He sees schism bloom behind him like a garden of knives, because every institution hates a man who proves it is not necessary for a good 10 minutes a day. The third is sanction. He sees himself in orange wrapped with gold edges, the aquila sewn above the turtle on his chest, the sigil of a world stitched into the story of a man. He sees a line of orders and missions, and moments where he is told to pick a target he would not have chosen. And he sees the weight of refusing when refusal costs others, not him. He sees impact. He sees compromise. He sees a ledger without end. Every road has blood in it. That is the first truth of this palace. He is given no counsel but the silence. He chooses the third path and immediately changes its grammar. I will help. He thinks so hard even the walls must hear it. But only under conditions. The first is that mercy is not treason. The second is that civilians are not bargaining chips. The third is that I do not carry out exterminations because someone lost their patience and found a stamp. The throne does not nod because the throne does not move, but something like a scent threads through the custody's ranks, like a string pulled tight. The Inquisitor inclines his head by a degree you could measure with holy calipers. The Palatine smiles with her eyes for the first time. He kneels, not because he is beaten, but because he is agreeing to carry weight with both hands. The healing is not a beam of light. It is a careful unwinding of the knot light caught in his hand and sighed by women whose silence is a scalpel. The purge is not a fire. It is a cool wind that smells like nothing cutting through the rooms that have smelled like incense too long. When he stands, his GI is the same color, and now edged with a narrow band of gold at the sleeves, and an aquila sits over the kanji at his chest, not erasing it, but sharing the space, beaks crossed. The sight will make heralds argue for a century. He returns to Sanctis Ferrum with a cadre he did not have before, and a mandate he will test at every edge. The governor meets him on the palace roof with her braid a little looser. The Inquisitor is present like a punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. He is not unhappy. He is prepared for work. The war is not over because he said yes. The enemies do not become less inventive because a good man agreed to take orders. Chaos learns. The next time, it poisons a water table with a heresy you have to drink to name. Goku carries casks uphill while others fight, because some days, the fight is a bucket. The time after, a Necron phalanx rises like a choir of bones and teaches him the humility of fighting something that has no metaphysics to push back on. He learns to break joints that have no flesh. He learns to throw them into pits of magnetized grit and to bow when the Magos does the real killing by humming at a tone only machines hear. A Tyranid splinter fleet gnaws a moon, and he spends a day destroying bioships in a ballet of disgust and pity, because the pity does not make the disgust less, and neither feeling changes the fact that those ships must die. He takes audiences in habarches with people whose faith is threaded through their hunger. He refuses an order once, politely, in public, and the refusal costs a career not his own. And he carries the grief because choice without cost is a story, not a life. He insists on evacuation before fire, and sometimes the fire comes first because stars do not rearrange themselves for one man's ethic. He sits on the edge of a gun barrel and teaches a boy how to breathe when he shoots so that the shot goes where it is supposed to, and not into someone not meant to hold it. He visits Terra again and again in thought, if not in body. He returns to the throne only once more in person, when the mirror foe tries a second time, bolder, wearing a face closer to his own. They fight in a canyon of broken statues, whose features have been shaved smooth by ceremony. He wins, not because he is stronger, but because he wants fewer things. He wants exactly one thing: to save people without becoming the book they are saved into. The foe leaves him a parting gift, a slice under the old scar. He presses his hand against it and laughs, and then winces and laughs again. Rival factions react the way stars do, by burning in their own colors. The Eldar watch him, and their seers murmur about probabilities that now have to account for a man who breaks curves by smiling at them. The Tau dispatch an envoy with a face too earnest for this galaxy, and he teaches the envoy a form and learns a phrase in her language that means, "Do not mistake process for purpose." The orcs call him a good fight and paint his hair on banners as a joke that becomes a superstition. The Drukhari learn to loathe him because he saves their cattle. The Necrons remove him from some lists and add him to others. The ruinous powers reframe their whispers and try new angles, patient as rust. The Grey Knights debate a paragraph about him in a codex no one will ever read without bleeding from the eyes. The Inquisitor grows older in the way people like him either do not or do all at once. He dies on a world with no name, buying time for a thing that will never say thank you. At the end, he looks at Goku, and his eyes are not small anymore. "You have given me a new heresy to hate," he says. Hope applied. Goku carries him to the pyre with hands that can lift reactors and sets him down like glass. Years pass, in the way time measures itself in an empire that eats calendars. Goku becomes a moving pageant, a story told by children who are allowed childhood because a macro battery fired late, and a demon ship stubbed its toe, and a man in orange punched something with the right amount of love. He is called champion, and he hates the word and accepts the work. He trains elites who will die and elites who will retire without ever telling anyone why their hands shake when they drink soup. He stares at a planet from orbit and wrestles with a line on an order that says, "Exterminatus approved," and chooses to argue and loses, and chooses to obey, and then spends a decade making sure that the next time the argument is shorter, because he has built something like a framework, where mercy is not an extra, but a field in a form. On a pale day over Sanctis Ferrum, he stands again on the palace balcony with the governor's successor, a woman with a braid, not like a whip, but like a rope for pulling ships to BTUs to shore. The sky is ordinary. It is the best thing about it. He touches the aquila sewn over his kanji and feels both symbols warm under his fingers. He understands something he could not have said when he fell through a wound here, that symbols are not perfect shapes. They are vessels that hold enough meaning to get you through a day when idle meaning will kill you. Below, pilgrims kneel and make their sign. Some add a second sign, a circle traced over the heart, and a small upward flick with 2 fingers, a gesture that means punch lightly when you can, and hard when you must. A child does it with fierce exaggeration. He grins, and the grin is less out of place now. Far away, a Black Legion warlord lifts a new blade and swears to wear the man in orange like a necklace. A hive fleet learns his silhouette and trains itself to swarm around it. The Mechanicus patents a litany based on the frequency of his shout. The Eldar fold him into a prophecy they will deliberately misread to keep their sanity. The throne room is as it was and will be, and the idea that sits in it watches a man move through duty like water through a channel cut into stone by hands that did not ask him if he liked stone. On the worst day, when a moon cracks and becomes a ring, and he cannot save all the people he promised himself he would, he sits on a ruined arch and counts by tens until the rage becomes something he can pour into a punch without breaking a person. He thinks of the 3 paths and knows that choice is not a door you go through once. It is a door that keeps appearing at the end of halls, and each time the handle is heavier, and each time you take it, because that is the story you chose to live in. Night falls over Sanctis Ferrum. The seam in the sky that brought him here has long since healed into a scar. You can only see if you know where to look. He looks. He breathes in air that always smells faintly of oil and incense, and something like rain, even when it has not rained in months. He feels the weight settle on his shoulders and does not shrug it. He squares himself and steps off the balcony, rising slow, a prayer written in muscle and will. Below, the hive lights come on, a constellation shoved into a jar, and far above somewhere, a god that is a man that is a machine, watches and does not smile and approves anyway. He is Goku of the Imperium now. His emblem is doubled. His mandate is conditional. His enemies are countless. His joy remains undestroyed. The galaxy notices and answers. On the far side of the segmentum, a world named Halcyon Gate puts its faith on rails and teeth. Gun fortresses crouch on mountain spines like patient wolves. Orbital plates sit in a ring that looks ceremonial until they fire and remind the void what the word means. A Black Crusade fragment tears in on a ragged path, less a fleet than a wound dragging ships behind it like scabs. Macro augurs clap awake. Psalms fall into firing solutions. Across a command dais stenciled with kill keys and guilt, the Admiral rubs his voice raw on orders that all start with hold. Goku drops out of warp transit with an escort of gold and silence. 2 custodes, 4 sisters, an inquisitorial cutter like a dagger, carried point down. He stands in the hololith's light in orange edged with thin imperial gold, his GI patched where a demon blade once argued with it. He studies the coming shapes, like a carpenter, looking at knots in a board. "Those 3, he says, pointing to ships whose silhouettes are wrong in a way that tastes of old fire. "They break the line if they live long enough." "Confirmed," the Magos says, voice filtered through devotion. "They project a bypass liturgy. Our shields will kneel. Then we don't let them speak," Goku says. He moves his fist in a small circle. The hololith blurs. He apologizes without words. He thinks of engines and throats. The battle opens like a book, taught to slam. Void shields bloom and bruise. Torpedoes write dotted lines through vacuum and end on prayers that either do or don't get answered. Goku goes outside without ceremony, because ships are rooms, and sometimes the best way to open a window is to remove the wall. He is a bright scrap against the emptiness, a dawn-colored note in a song scored for guns. He doesn't punch ships. He punches ideas attached to ships. A lance battery spools a ritual into light. He threads the ritual with his body and knots it, so the beam arrives at itself and apologizes. A macro cannon breathes. He cups the breath and turns it, and the litany in the round cascades backward, lodging in the breach like embarrassment. A thruster coughs destabilizing hymns. He strikes above it, making a vacuum vibration that snips the hymn mid-stanza. The ship skews in confusion, and confusion is the best armor a foe can wear because it keeps them from aiming at people. A word. Bearer's strike cruiser uncorks a chant so old it smells like mildew. Its prow bears a spiked book. Goku puts his palm against the hull between 2 ribs and listens. The living metal of the ship hums back, with 1,000 voices looped and layered. He is not a psyker. He cannot talk to it, but he can find rhythm. He can break tempo. He raps the hull 4 times, then 3, then once. He chooses the empty beat where the chant inhales and hits that beat like a bell. The hymn stutters. The bypass liturgy kneels. Halcyon Gate breathes a macro breath it's been holding since the First Crusade and tears the word-bearers in half. People cheer in ways they will later be ashamed of, and right now are clean. On the dark side of the world, in the underhive cloaca where industry rots into ritual, a word-bearer dark apostle lights a circle with the grease of dead machines and the worry of 1,000,000 citizens, siphoned through fear. Refugees crowd the cisterns. The cult's plan is as simple as a throat. Trade terrified bodies for a gate. Goku feels the gravity of screams with the key sense that has nothing to do with warp and everything to do with breath. He breaks off from the void and drops through Halcyon's clouds as if the air invited him. He lands in shining water streaked with oil, knees bent, hands open. The dark apostle raises a chain blade, shaped as a line of scripture read wrong. Its teeth chatter like a schoolyard gone feral. "Move," Goku says to the crowd, soft as a father waking a sleeping child. They do not move because panic is glue. He cannot fight here without making more of the thing he hates. He steps forward anyway, and makes his world small enough that only 2 lives can fit in it. The Zealots and his. He anticipates the chain blade's hungry reach and cuts its angles in half before they exist. The apostle spits syllables that curdle partnership into command. The crowd shudders toward obedience. Goku changes elevation by a finger's width. The blade's arc kisses air. He taps the apostle on the wrist with enough force to make the fingers open out of politeness. The blade drops. The apostle smiles with hooks. Teeth were never the point. He speaks the gate name with his blood. The circle pulls inward like a wound tightening. A mouth begins to appear, where no mouth has any right. Goku makes a choice and hates it. He turns away from the apostle and lifts the closest line of human bodies. Dozens upon dozens, painfully gently, and runs them like a river down a corridor he makes by knocking pillars aside, as if they were brittle bread. The mouth grows. The apostle laughs and dies under the Palatine's bolter a minute later. Too late to take the laugh back. A demon's hand tests the room like a thief checking a lock. The sisters step into the doorway and become the negative of noise. The hand recoils. The gate closes like a trap that didn't spring. Everyone lives who is in the corridor. Everyone in the circle who wasn't fast doesn't. The governor on Halcyon says the numbers to him in private because that is what ethics demands. 15, saved in 100. He does not look away. He does not pretend. Next time, he says, and doesn't finish. Because finishing would be a prayer. And he believes in prayers that go with plans. He spends the week that follows teaching the local regiments how to move a crowd without turning it into a stampede. He drags sparring mats into a cistern and shows children how to fall without breaking themselves. He asks the magos for schematics and learns how the cisterns bleed into one another. He sketches new doorways and refuses to take credit when they are cut. On the voyage out, the Mechanicus makes a polite attempt to take his key apart. They arrange runes that are also machines and request that he stand inside a circle drawn with silver thread stolen from a saint's hem. They speak in a language that sounds like mercy beaten into math. Anima flux, a secutor says, reverent. Non-immateric, non-electromantic. A third thing, a first thing, Goku suggests, smiling because that makes curiosity less afraid. He lets them measure his breath. He lets them place rings around his wrists that hum when he thinks too hard. He does not let them keep the blood they casually collect from a cut he no longer feels. He drinks the blood back in. The Magos writes a new marginalia in his heart about matter and offense. The Inquisitor watches without interfering. Later, he peels a vellum strip from the inside of his sleeve and shows it to Goku. It is covered in cramped notes and a single sentence copied 3 times in a hand that got larger and then calmed down. Do not make a litany of the man. Thank you, Goku says, unsure, and pockets the paper like a relic, and later uses it as a bookmark in a training manual, and feels right about both choices. Word spreads that an orange-clad sanctioned asset will rearrange your war if you let him. Some commanders invite him with gratitude, others with teeth. On Novum Enoch, an ecclesiarchal research choir tries to dam the warp with a song you can only sing by hurting yourself. The dam bursts. The city's center becomes quietus. A field where psychers go silent, and sisters feel like people for the first time and hate it. He steps into the field with them because their silence is a friend to him. His ki thins as if he is breathing at altitude. Good, he thinks. Then this is the room we fight in. Necrons open like flowers of disdain from beneath Novum Enoch. Nodding at the field, as if it confirms a theorem, they harvest the choir's broken instruments, as if stealing music were a practical job. Word-bearers arrive to argue with the Necrons about how best to insult the city. For a minute, the two factions kill one another without needing help. Then they remember the Imperium exists. Goku fights without air under him. He fights in stairwells, in choke points, where one hand replaces a lost second, where a foot placed in a doorway holds an entire floor in place. He breaks Necrodermis' wrists with perfect angles that make ancient metal realize it has elbows. He takes a scar from a Gauss flare that looks like a lesson in straight lines. He dismantles the spine of a word-bearer's champion, while never touching the spikes that are trophies, so that mercy does not turn into mockery. He climbs the choir's ruptured gantries with a sister on his back, because she sprained an ankle and refuses to admit it. And he refuses to allow refusal to make things worse. They reach the resonator at the top, a plate of harmonics, not unlike a ship's soul, made literal. He remembers Amagos humming. He hums, badly. The plate shivers. The field flickers. Psychers die from nosebleeds less impressively. He winces and keeps humming. The Palatine hears the awful sound and matches it properly. The plate steadies into a tone the world can digest. Quietus recedes a little. It is not a miracle. It is relief. Infantry cheers. Somewhere in a lower city quadrangle, a woman stops shaking and laughs in a way that is not hysterical. He chalks that laugh in the margin of his mind and spends it later when he needs to stand up again. Between wars, he builds. He refuses monuments. He sketches training yards that fit between manufactorum stacks. He designs, with guard veterans rolling their eyes and then nodding, a set of drills that teach breath first, trigger second. He calls it solar kata, because the Mechanicus insists on naming things as if names are bolts. The kata look like prayer to people who need them to, and like exercise to people who hate prayer. He teaches someone in every regiment to teach someone else, then leaves. The Inquisitor watches dissemination statistics like a miser counting coins and finds a new joy in stinginess, keeping a tally of hope. The mirror foe finds him again on a world of windmills and bones, where the locals make flour and lists of crimes with equal care. It wears his rough shape and carries nothing but intent, sharpened to an edge. It walks through a regiment with the efficiency of policy. It does not kill gratuitously. It kills correctly. Optimization, it says, as if tasting the word. You like to say no to math and yes to moments. Do the math. Every mercy here grows tomorrow's atrocity by one. Cut the root. Be finished. Rest. Goku is tired. He is human enough to want rest. He looks down the line of soldiers bracing in that way that means they are about to be broken in a neat, tidy way, and he decides again, the way you decide each day to stay married, to keep a promise. We don't rest, he says. We sleep. They're different. They fight in a grain field too golden to deserve blood. He refuses again to go cold. He keeps warmth as a posture and loses skin for it. The mirror lands 2 clean shots he will never forget. The sky thickens. A crosswind like a chewed prayer rolls across the hill. A vox thurible on a standard releases a smell like copper tears. The custodian with him says nothing, but shifts his stance in a way that gives Goku an extra inch on his left. An inch matters. The mirror stumbles on it and sneers and blinks out, not fleeing so much as postponing victory to conserve style. After, Goku sits with the regiment and drinks something hot that tastes like chemicals and comfort. We held, a sergeant says, hoarse with disbelief. You did, he says. You could have done it without us. No, he says, blunt as a hammer. I could have killed them without you. That's not it. The sergeant files that away under truths that let you stand up tomorrow. He is summoned to a colony named Laeth's Damocles, where the argument is not whether to fight, but whether to erase. The Ordo Hereticus presents numbers you cannot argue with unless you choose not to live inside numbers. Contagion vectors, ritual density, atmospheric penetration. The Exterminatus stamp glows like a pocket sun. The governor makes the case for time in a voice that keeps trying to apologize for itself because it was not trained to ask for miracles. Goku reads the order and thinks of the conditions he gave on Terra. He says no. He says it publicly. He provides alternatives that sound like hope, pretending to be logistics. Targeted culls of cult leadership, naval quarantine, mass evacuation through corridors, carved out by the Solar Kata's crowd doctrine. It is possible, he says. Possible is not probable. He will carry the improbable end with his body. The debate is a long knife. The Inquisitor stands with him where he can. The Admiral stands with him where ships can actually stand. The Palatine stands with him because faith needs something to hang hats on besides guilt. They win an inch. The stamp dims. The evacuation corridors open like veins. The enemy adjusts, as all enemies do. They ride the corridors, bleeding panic into ambush. He breaks ambushes. He takes shots meant for people who will never know his name and who would burn him if told to. He counts those facts and feels them without letting them become weight. The day breaks in half. By dusk, the stamp is taken off the table not because it was never needed, but because someone did the harder thing first. The price is engraved into him, not as wound, because those close, but as choices that won't. A platoon dies covering an intersection because an unexpected vector arrived that would not have if things had been simpler and crueler. He walks through their names at night like a man in a library. He does not absolve himself. He does not drown. He lets the weight sit where it should and does not hand it to someone else. He meets an Eldar Farseer on a shard of Craftworld caught in the polite gravity of a dying star. They do the cautious dance of species who have killed one another enough to know manners. She speaks of skeins and knots and exhalations of fate. He speaks of days and breath and fists that are letters you write to the world because sometimes talking fails. You are a warm point, she says. Our charts curl around you. It is inconvenient. Sorry, he says, meaning it and not. Where I'm from, we just call that trying. The universe detests trying. It prefers outcomes. Outcomes are yesterday. Trying is today. She snorts in a way that suggests she remembers being young and hates him for making her remember. Keep annoying destiny, she says. It may grow tired and leave. On a pilgrimage circuit that links shrines by the safest possible lies. He pauses in a Schola Progenium dormitory, where children carry themselves like empty notebooks waiting for doctrine. He tells them a story about a man who could break a planet and chose instead to break bread. The headmaster watches in disapproval and fascination. Later, the children in fists learn Solar Kata in a courtyard, and some of them will become commissars who pause before shooting, and some will become rumor, and some will die too cleanly. And life will go on with its usual cruelty. The mirror foe grows bolder. It infiltrates a parade by wearing a uniform of Goku's own order. Ribbons laid where ribbons belong. Face almost right in the way a forgery that costs a fortune can be. It waits until people cheer. Then it shows a crowd the clean math of terror and says the quiet part out loud. Optimization. It reaches for the governor's throat to prove a point about leverage. Goku arrives late by exactly 2 heartbeats and has to spend the entire rest of the week making those 2 heartbeats pay interest. He throws the mirror through 2 layers of pageantry and a colonnade that was carved from penance. It stands and smiles because shame is not on its list. He meets a gray knight in a cloister where the light is all angles and the floor is nicer than most people's memorials. They do not spar, because one of them is made for killing a kind of thing, the other is not. They talk the way people do when their jobs rhyme. The knight is a wall with opinions. Mercy is a sword with both edges on your side, the knight says. We do not swing it often. It's heavy, Goku agrees. You get stronger by lifting heavy things. It kills you by inches, the knight says, not disagreeing. Everything worth it does. They end the conversation by not promising each other anything, and meaning everything they did not say. His reputation acquires necessary enemies. A secular lord in the Segmentum Pacificus writes a micro-doctrine that bans solar kata as mind laxity. Goku does not argue with policy. He slips into the world at night like a rumor and teaches a man who cleans latrines a breathing exercise that will one day let him keep a company alive in a tunnel because he will not panic. The lord dies of gout. The doctrine fades like paint in sun. The breathing remains. The ruinous powers study him. The blade that cut him once returns in a new hand. The champion is different. Voice not broken. Will intact. Arrogance like perfume. The blade is sharper in semantics. It cuts, always. He learns this when a promise he made to a child splits into two, what he wanted to say and what he actually could keep. He staggers on that incision and understands that even words can be wounds. He grips the champion by the wrist and elbow and knee and neck and puts him on the ground in a shape the blade cannot justify. He does not drive the blade into dirt. He lays it flat and lets a sister put her foot on it and glare until it forgets all the languages it knows. The mirror foe finally pauses its smart retreat pattern and tries to win a world. It chooses Vortis, an orbital forge whose inhabitants believe that making things is a moral act. It convinces half the station that efficiency is morality, and the other half that efficiency is treason. It tips the table and waits for both sides to break. Goku arrives at the end of a long corridor of choices with a team as incomplete and perfect as any family. A palatine with battered faith, a custodian who believes that words are knives if you sharpen them on duty, a magos who secretly loves the sound of unmeasured laughter, and an inquisitor who is entirely himself, which is to say, a machine built of doubt and edge. The fight is not one fight. It is 97 small fights linked by attention. It is rerouting pressure without losing heat. It is choosing who to save when the door narrows to one. The mirror foe keeps offering him the easy line. Cut here, kill that, collapse this, end the problem. He says no in 100 ways, and yes when no would be vanity. He loses people he can name. He stops a grav plate from flipping and crushing 1,000 workers because he braces with his back and thought, and because the custodian's hand turns the right valve at the right moment, and because the palatine shoots a chain, and because the magos watches light like a poet watches weather. The mirror foe realizes that he has given them too many tools by lecturing in public and blinks out with disgust. It leaves a written note in a script that looks like his pulse. Rest later. He does, once in a while. He sits in rooms with clean sheets and bad coffee, and the low, dull ache of being alive too long in too many directions. He fishes from a pier on a world that destroyed most of its water to make room for manufactoria, and then saved a cup of it to pretend it hadn't. He catches nothing. Catching is not the point. A child sits next to him and asks if he can make the sun explode. He says yes, and then doesn't. Years wait him without bending. The Inquisitor dies, and later the Palatine does. Not in battle, but in bed, after a life spent turning violence into liturgy and laughter into medicine. He holds her hand and listens to a war leader die of the most honest thing in a dishonest universe. Time. She says, "You never learned to kneel right." "I kneel like I stand," he says. Not clever, just true. She squeezes. Good. There are failures that never stop being that. A hive burns because he was on another world, and the stamp fell when it had to. He attends the memorial without speaking, and digs with guardsmen in the ash. because there are still bodies in there who deserve a good lie down and a lower ceiling. He learns a song the survivors sing and hates it until he learns to like it because it lets them breathe. He returns to Terra once more, not for judgment this time, but because ritual is scaffolding, and sometimes you have to check your weight bearing. The throne does not change. The custodes who knew him are dead and replaced by others who rid their names off a roll and mean them anyway. He stands, gold-edged and orange heart, and thinks his condition back at the throne to make sure it still fits. Mercy is not treason. Civilians are not bargaining chips. No exterminations because someone found a stamp. He adds a fourth. We do not make heroes we can't afford to lose. The throne does not answer. The silence agrees. Back on Sanctis Ferrum, the governor's successor's successor strings lights over the palace roof, unthinkable once, and now a quiet tradition, and invites him to a feast he tries to refuse and cannot. They eat bland food together because the supply chain is dull glory, and everyone is grateful for dull. Priests bless the ovens. Children recite lists of names, and he hears the inquisitors among them and feels his throat pull tight in a way that is not sadness, but its cousin. A new war begins somewhere else. They always do. He goes. He will always go until he can't. He leaves behind training regiments, doctrine tweaks, 1,000 tiny habits that make death less greedy. He leaves behind a mark that is not a statue, but a posture. On the palace's outer wall, someone paints his sigil as vandalism, and someone else frames it, and a third person scours it off, and all three choices are the right kind of argument. Rival factions cue their answers. A Drukhari Archon swears to bottle his laugh and drink it on a day she wants to feel something like remorse. A Tau Ethereal writes a pamphlet on cooperative autonomy and adds an image of an orange figure in the margin as a dangerous, useful myth. A Necron overlord instructs his cryptex to model a probability cloud that includes warm interference and tells them he will unmake whichever of them uses the word soul. A hive fleet twitches a tendril and tries to learn the taste of a keyflare, fails and adjusts. In a refectory on a cruise liner that smells like boiled starch and hope, a guardsman shows another how to breathe before a shot. In a manufactorum that eats hands, a worker uses a solar kata step to pivot away from a falling girder, then shows three friends and laughs and pretends she made it up. In a scolum, a child draws a double-headed bird over a circle with a turtle inside it, and the teacher makes him erase the turtle and then draws it herself in the corner in tiny ink where no one will make her erase anything. On a night where the stars are arrogant and the air is a little cleaner than usual, he stands on the same balcony where he once landed like a fool with a grin. He leans into the railing like a man at home in an uncomfortable place. He scans the sky for the seam that brought him and sees only a line that exists because his memory insists. He feels old in newcomer years and young in emperor years, and laughs because both are true, and both will kill you if you worship them. He hears boots and knows the steps. The governor's successor's daughter, hair braided like a practical plan, stands beside him. She is not yet done being disillusioned with everything. "How do you keep choosing?" she asks, voice low to not wake the ceremonial pigeons. "I practice," he says. "It doesn't get easier?" "No, but I get better." "At what?" "At carrying the part I can carry without pretending I can carry the part that would make me a liar." She looks at the city. It glows like a hearth under a storm that has not yet arrived. "Thank you," she says, and he nods because the words are too small, and that is what makes them perfect. Far out, beyond the reach of this night, a warlord carves his name into a demon engine's flank and spells Goku wrong because correctness is not a virtue he respects. Another sets a bounty and a prayer and hopes one will pay off. A third looks into a pool and sees himself lose and breaks the pool and calls that victory. The galaxy is very bad at agreeing. It is excellent at continuation. On a day with no omen, he fights in a canyon cut by artillery into a mountain that didn't deserve it. The mirror foe arrives with no lesson, no lecture, just a blade of intent that could be any kind, any cause. They greet each other like men who cannot respect one another, and must anyway. They move with the grace of repetition. He ends it with a throw that looks like apology, and is not. It is a geometry you use when words have lost their edge. The mirror lands hard and rolls and lies still, breathing. It looks up. For a second, its eyes are his. There is a version of us that rests, it says. Maybe, he says. Not this one. It dissolves into 1,000 almosts. He feels a mercy he did not perform as if it were weight anyway, because absences are heavy too. The last image you will carry from this period is not a battle or a throne. It is a mural painted on the inner wall of a transport tunnel so old it has names carved into it by people who left for wars that ended before their ink dried. The mural shows an orange figure mid-step, not flying, but walking, one hand open, the other in a guard that is also a greeting. Above him, the Aquila spreads beaks, one pointed forward, one back, and between them, the small kanji rests stubborn in its original color. Around the figure are stenciled hands in grease and chalk, and blood, all different sizes, each labeled not with a name but with a habit. Cooks, loaders, singers, engineers, mothers, sons, doubters, believers. A small sticker at the bottom says, "Punch lightly when you can." A larger one, added later by someone who needed to add something and did not have a lot of time, says, "And hard when you must." He passes the mural one day on his way to a dock where a ship named for a saint who lied well enough to hide children waits to take him somewhere with a bad sky and a good chance. He pauses, touches the kanji with a knuckle, and smiles. It is less out of place every year. The galaxy notices again, and answers again. He goes. A storm of light breaks over the pale scar, where the warp and void learned to take turns hurting reality, and then grew bored with taking turns. Watch stations blink awake like cats opening one eye. Vox nets rattle into a single braided order. Reroute pilgrimage routes. Silence civilian bands. Light the bastions. In the choir halls of Sanctis Ferrum, the astropaths groan in unison before their own blood tells them why. Someone is trying to make a gate out of a scar, and a scar out of a world. Goku stands on a landing platform with the governor's successor's successor and watches the auroras crackle in colors this sky never earned. The custodies at his shoulders are new and exactly the same. The sisters are the same and exactly new. He breathes in for 4, out for 4, and feels the wind argue across the edge of the hive like two old enemies pretending to be tired. "That's not just another raid," he says. "No." The Magos beside him, mechadendrites held like a pen over a ledger, scratches symbols into air. Noctilith register, Blackstone signatures. Someone has erected a null engine above Aureate Verge. She manages to say all that like it's a bad smell under a good door. Aureate Verge is a shrine world, the governor says. Her mouth tightens, mantra flat. And our relay to 2 sectors. If a null field sits there, we go deaf. The Admiral finishes over Vox. Blind if we're unlucky. Dumb if we choose wrong, the Inquisitor says. This one is younger than the man Goku carried to a pyre. His voice does not try to be old. That makes it dangerous. We deploy. Sanctioned asset. We test your conditions under worst case. Tested every day, Goku says without heat. And the Inquisitor tilts a fraction that could be read as respect or preparation, which is what respect looks like in his order. Transit is a blade. They ride its edge. The fleet exits warp like a hand snapping out of a glove and immediately hits the quiet. Not silence, quiet. Noise without its soul. Goku feels the difference the way a singer would feel his own throat missing a favorite note. His kai thins. He flexes hands anyway. The sisters around him smile without smiling. This is their air. The Noctilith Engine sits above Aureate Verge like a black coin the size of a continent. Lances spare it because lances whisper in their sleep when Blackstone is near and wake with guilt. The station that birthed it is all angles and spite. A Mechanicus cathedral stolen and rewritten with lines that hate God and machines equally. Goku looks for seams. The hololith denies him. He looks with breath instead. There. The pressure isn't even. 2 anchors, he says, pointing to points where gravity bends without permission. Cut both, or it learns. Cut both, the Admiral agrees, as if that was always the plan. Necrons unscroll from the far side in silver ranks, like a metaphor for inevitability. Word-bearers flare from the near side in red ranks, like a metaphor that decided to fight the other metaphor for the right to be the lesson of the day. Their alliance is not cooperation. It's a temporary truce between insults. The first minutes write the geometry. Necron arcs clap the void into straight lines. Chaos litanies curl around those lines like barbed wire. Macro batteries try to answer and get talked over. The Palatine, no, Canoness now, a title battered into her whether she asked or not, calls the sisters into a net. We walk the quiet, she says. And Goku nods as if he is hearing a martial art explained correctly. He goes outside. He cannot fly far. He doesn't need to. He moves in the teeth of the null. Each step across vacuum a calculation paid for in muscle and memory. The first anchor is a dead star's rib, pinned into a machine that sings indecision. Goku lands on it like it's a training pole, goes low, and drives a punch exactly where the song is most smug. No crack, only a change in the timbre that anyone deaf to breath would miss. He hits again, an inch to the left, and understands the shape of the note. Here, he says to the custodian behind him, who doesn't fly so much as rewrite gravity by disapproval. The custodian plants a spear with a gesture that makes physics embarrassed. The rib song drops a register. The field flickers. A Necron lord steps across space without moving. Its scythe is an argument sharpened over 1 billion repetitions. Remove, 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 until what remains is dignified enough to call reality. The scythe doesn't even hum. It doesn't have to. He can feel his hand forget it exists when the blade passes nearby. He withdraws the hand and fights with the other, because this keeps happening. And he refuses to pretend otherwise. They trade quanta. He uses elbows in places where it expects a foot, uses a knee when it expects a palm, gives it a problem of timing and anatomy rather than metaphysics. It adjusts. It learns. He learns faster. He uses the scythe's lack of sound against it, letting the silence telegraph. When the Lord raises its arm to correct, he steps inside the arc and hangs there for a beat longer than is comfortable, then hits. The head separates, not because heads are vulnerable, but because joints are joints when you refuse to mythologize them. He punts it into a waiting tank trap of gravity the Magos lowers like a baited lid. Somewhere far away, a Necron cryptech has to update a file about things and resents it. On the other anchor, a word-bearer's dark apostle broadcasts a theology of surrender, disguised as courage. His blade is not the blade that cut Goku, but it learned from that blade and took evening classes. It cuts again. Every time Goku closes a hole, it opens that hole where it used to be, demanding repetition until a man dies from boredom or exhaustion. He stops meeting the blade with closure. He begins to leave things almost done in places only he can track, and watches the apostle get angry at the lack of tidy. Anger opens him. The canoness is there, because of course she is. She steps into that open and shoots exactly once. The apostle's broadcast cuts out mid-virtue. With both anchors compromised, the engine shivers. A choir on Aureate Verge that had forgotten how to pray finds enough noise to call out. The black coin jitters. The quiet becomes patchy. Psychers bleed less. The sisters breathe like people and hate it, and hold formation anyway. Then the mirror foe arrives, not as a man, but as a ledger, projected in light. Each line a life, each column a loss prevented by a single messy choice cut from the menu. It glosses the station in equations and opens on wideband with a voice like a report read at midnight. Optimization. The word lands on the bridge like a paperweight on a heart. The Inquisitor stiffens. The Admiral grimaces. The Magos says nothing. And that is new. It speaks before it acts. Rare. Your conditions are expensive, it says in Goku's ear and in every other. Let me carry your cost. I will change one thing. You will get your mercy. At scale. No more individual arguments. One policy. Implemented. What policy? He asks, already knowing disgust and curiosity will wrestle, and both are useful. We spare civilians, it says. And even the canoness relaxes half a degree. By ending their capacity to be used, we remove doctrine. We lobotomize ruin. We take the tool out of the hand. We reduce variables to human desire and reshape the desire with a pain we do not call pain. That's not mercy, he says. That's sedation. Mercy is sedation with hymns, it says. And the word-bearers laugh because they love good blasphemy even when it isn't theirs. It moves. It has a blade now. No, an edge of policy-made shape. On its length are stamped words: spare, clean, sober, always, never, for all. The same sword that cut always from him once, redesigned with office fonts. It swings for the engine, meaning to finalize a neat end. He steps in and blocks in a way he never teaches, because he doesn't want kids to think this is normal. With his forearm and the willingness to lose skin, he feels the edge try to make truth permanent. He gives it sometimes instead. You don't beat always with always. You beat it with maybe, now, here. The clash is dull. The sound of policy meeting circumstance. The mirror presses because it always presses. He yields because yielding is a technique you can only use if you're not a coward. The edge slides past the engine's heart by fingers. That is enough to keep the quiet from becoming silence, the gate from becoming a throat. The sisters open theirs as a choir. It is not a oneness. It is a chord braided of silences, each different, each trained. They spread not to envelop, but to outline, giving the null shape, the way a frame gives a picture a way to be seen. The Magos triggers a Cantus null from a relic spire rebuilt from an STC that probably never existed. It is not Deus. It is X. It presses outward and tells bad math to sit. The mirror adapts. It always does. It shifts its edge to cut choice. He remembers a boy asking if he can make the sun explode. He answers now the way he did then. Yes and not. He kicks the mirror in the ribs, exactly where its breath would be if it needed breath. He does not push it away from the engine. He pushes it into the Blackstone's least interesting face. The edge meets a material made to humiliate edges. Sparks or theories falling out of fashion. The word always chips. A tiny flake. Enough. It looks at him with fury because something fundamental was made situational. You corrupt, it says. I complicate, he says. They fight long enough for battles to tilt elsewhere. The Admiral pulls a flanking fire through a gap the fight incidentally made. The canoness walks 3 squads across a corridor of not quiet and holds because holding is a verb she loves. The custodian breaks a Necron phalanx by telling it with his spear that regardless of how long it has walked, it stops here. Goku takes the mirror's shoulder joint with his palm and turns it into understanding. He tosses it. No, he places it where gravity will treat it properly. And it goes. Because even perfect policies must obey mass. It blinks out a blink too late to call graceful. They blow the engine by persuasion. Lances are not convinced. Prayer is not convinced. So the Magos convinces a small part of the station that it is heavy and guilty. Goku convinces the other part that it wants to fall. Down is a moral argument. The structure listens and fails In the way a bridge fails under a crowd told to jump at exactly the right time, the black coin becomes a rain of not light that doesn't make it to ground. The quiet returns to being a discipline rather than a regime. On Aureate Verge, pilgrims who had been told to go home because their god could not hear them today lay flowers on stairs and laugh the laugh humans laugh when the world refuses to be an easy story. Goku eats something fried and terrible from a street vendor because ritual is a scaffold and also lunch. The vendor's hands shake until they don't. The Inquisitor convenes a conclave a week later because his job is to be the man who asks if they created a heresy by refusing to kill enough people. The hall is a geometry built to make men feel smaller than their hats. He stares at Goku. Your doctrine spreads. It's not doctrine, Goku says. It's drills. Drills are doctrine for those who live long enough, someone says from a balcony where no one invited voices, and half the room recognizes the old man who said it, 5 years dead. They argue properly. No quips. Numbers bite. Ethics bleed. The admiral counts ships like rosary beads and asks which war they won today because of kindness last year. The canoness recites names as if they are reasons. The magos produces graphs that no one likes and everyone memorizes. The Inquisitor says the quiet part without flinching. Mercy has a cost. We have paid some. We will pay more. Are you content to turn that cost into a budget line? Because once it is a budget line, we will forget to look at it. No, Goku says, voice low. We keep receipts. We read them at night. We don't stop because reading hurts. They draft the Ferrum Concordat with a pen that stutters and inks anyway. 3 lines and an addendum that is really a knife guard. Mercy is not treason. Civilians are not bargaining chips. Exterminatus is not a stamp you use when tired. Addendum, we will not make idols of the hands that lift these lines. It is both a victory and a compromise. It will be misused and used. That is what paper is for. Outside the conclave, a crowd waits because crowds smell turning points, even when forbidden from elegant words. Children peer around knees to watch the orange man with gold edges, to see if he looks more like a statue today. He looks like someone coming off a long shift. They are not disappointed. They sigh the way you sigh when your parent comes home alive. The mirror foe does not stop. It cannot. It sets up a school in the ash belt of a world that prides itself on surviving by doing the least work necessary. It teaches solar kata with an extra movement introduced just for optimization. A little twist that snaps a neck while you bow. Students flourish. Crime drops. Evacuation drills become efficient and cold. Goku visits by accident on purpose and watches a class move as one. He waits until the teacher bows and inserts himself with a joke that doesn't land and a correction that does. He shows the low-temperature version of a gesture that can kill and gives it permission to be only a greeting again. The class rebels slowly, in joints. The teacher adjusts with politics under his tongue. Later, the mirror foe writes him a note in wind on a dock. You are heavy labor. He writes back in his head. Good. He helps a Tau commander rescue her cadre from a misunderstanding that was going to become a policy. He stands between a commissar and a kid whose hands won't stop shaking and says nothing until the room's air remembers what use it has, besides being inhaled between orders. He catches a Drukari barbed philosophy mid-raid and throws it back with a laughter that hurts more than their knives. He learns the names of 3 hive clans and then forgets them and apologizes to a woman who keeps her whole people in her memory. And she accepts because apologies are useful. He fights a tyrannid synapse creature in a canyon where the ground is teeth. The thing learns his silhouette and teaches its swarm to go around it. He steps aside and lets the swarm run into a trap built by ordinary guardsmen who believed a man when he told them they could lay out a map of death that did not include themselves. Afterwards, They sit together under a tarp that leaks and eat soup that tastes like rust and resolve and a little joy. He listens to them tell a joke he has heard in 6 systems and laughs as if he hasn't, because it is funny every time when it's yours. He watches a Mechanicus sect attempt to bottle his key into quantized servitor movements. He stops them, not because it would work, but because it would make 3 generations of adepts otherwise useful learn the wrong lessons about living power. He teaches them to breathe instead, and they call the breathing an algorithm, and it's wrong, and it works, and he lets it go. There are days he loses. A carrier with refugees folds wrong in warp because a mathematician miscopied a line of a prayer. He feels it and cannot arrive, because arrival is not always a verb you get to pick. He stands in an empty space, late, and says their names into his fists because he promised himself he would know them when he had to punch again. The next day he punches without vengeance, and because of it, the punch lands clean. The mirror foe asks for parley once, because boredom nips even perfection. They meet on a broken refinery roof as storm fronts stack like sheets. The mirror speaks first, unusual enough to be a signal. There is a version, it says, where we are one man. We are one man, he says. He's here. No, it says, and for the first time it sounds tired. He is a myth. We are busy failing. We are a practice he is busy learning. Do you ever rest, son? It asks, venom drained. When other people can, he says. Luxury, discipline, he corrects. They fight because it would be rude not to. It leaves a cut on his ear he will carry for months, and he leaves a bruise on its thought that will make it hesitate when a certain pattern appears. That is the entire point. Make evil hesitate, even by a breath. A breath is a universe. He returns to Sanctis Ferrum for a festival invented last year. Strings of lights, bad bread, better laughter. A stage where children perform plays in which he is played by 3 actors because no one wanted to be anyone else. The governor's line continues stoic and braided. The canoness drinks a cup of something awful and makes a face she would deny. The magos applauds wrong beats with the glee of a student who has cheated honestly for the first time. He stands in the back and claps because being a symbol should never include taking up the whole foreground. An alarm sounds. Not loud, firm, duty, on time. He goes. Of course he does. He always will until he can't. The symbol painted on a wall, Aquila jaws sharing space with a stubborn turtle, does not blur when he passes. It brightens. He leads a relief push into a system where a false saint is eating the poor. He exposes the lie not by beheading a statue, but by opening storehouses with his hands and then holding the doors when the crowd arrives so no one gets crushed. He fights a corrupted night engine by stepping into the knee and teaching it humility with a crowbar of physics. He argues with a Lord Solar who calls him a distraction and wins the argument by losing a duel in a way that forces the Lord to see his own doctrine bleed and choose whether to lick the wound or bind it. The Lord binds it. That is victory. There is a day he cannot fight, not because he is hurt, but because being seen fighting would make a riot. He sits in a cloister with the pen and signs 100 forms, turning a corridor into a corridor with guards who have training in not escalating. He leaves before anyone thinks to name the corridor after him. He is not humble. He is efficient at keeping the story pointed at the right nouns. He receives a sealed packet from Terra. Not orders. The orders are inside but incidental. The outer sheet is ink-thin gold leaf, the Ferrum Concordat, with a stamp that says, "This is not doctrine, even when people will treat it as doctrine." At the bottom, a hand has written, not the Emperor's, because the Emperor does not write, but someone close enough to make a scribe bleed if they misspell. If the price rises beyond our budget, you will tell us. We will not pretend we can't hear it. He writes back on a scrap he tears from an ammo crate. I will. Stop me when I think I can carry it all. Sign, Goku. The courier reads the note because he has to, because protocol, and cries in a way that does not embarrass him or anyone watching. The mirror foe tries one last clean line. It hijacks a pilgrim fleet with logic so tidy the captain almost thanks it. It sets course for Terra, as if to show him a door he chose once and can be closed with less drama. He intercepts at the edge of an old minefield laid by a navy that signed its warrants with salt. The mirror prepares the blade of For All. He comes empty-handed and full of habit. They circle once. He says, "We can end this if you want." It ends when you fail, it says. "I will, but not today." They join. He takes the blade at the notch where For meets All, where the language needs a breath. He breaks that breath. The blade becomes two words, For and All. And without a preposition, they hang in the air like good intentions. The mirror looks down at the grammar it loved and laughs. It is not a nice laugh. It is not cruel. It is the laugh of someone finally tired. It dissolves without drama. It will be back in other clothes. That is not failure. That is life. He escorts the pilgrim fleet home and refuses to land on Terra, because landing on Terra too often makes you forget to leave. Years accrete. The solar kata spreads and is misremembered, and that is healthy. Children in 5 hives practice a breathing game that will one day keep a mag tram from becoming a tomb. A magos builds a metronome that taps the perfect cadence for crowd movement and refuses to patent it. A canoness dies, and 3 novices argue over whether to keep the addendum on the concordat. They do, because loss is precisely when idols try to sneak in wearing grief. An admiral retires and becomes a tutor who tells new captains that mercy is the best way to test your gunnery because it makes you shoot later and better. A commissar is court-martialed for waiting and acquitted because Goku sat in the back and because the jury understood math differently this year. He ages slow, like a story told at the right speed. The orange phrase, the gold remains. The turtle keeps smiling, stubborn. He finds himself teaching more than he fights, and is surprised to discover he loves it without the lie of pretending he doesn't miss the clean answer a fist sometimes provides. He still fights. He always will. On a day of no special note, he walks alone through a manufactorum district that has learned to be proud without being deadly. He stops at a mural he has never seen, and that has always been here, because that is how murals work. It shows 2 birds and a circle and 1,000 hands. Someone has added, in tiny letters between 2 fingers, a line that is not scripture and feels like it. We do the heavy thing together. He touches the paint. It's dry and also wet, because someone will always be fixing it. He steps back. He looks up. The seam that split the sky years ago is gone. The scar it left is visible only if you know where to look or believe hard enough to make memory a lens. He does. He sees it. He nods to it like an old neighbor. Then he steps off the edge of the walkway and rises, unhurried, into a night that will be interrupted by duty again and again. And each time he will go, because that is the job he chose when he said yes and wrote conditions under the word. Elsewhere, in places his breath will reach later, the galaxy lays out counters like cutlery before a meal. A Black Legion warlord bargains with an engine and promises to bring back the head with the turtle on it, as if that will make the engine love him. A hive fleet twines around a star and tries to imagine a flavor like resolve. It fails and eats anyway. A Necron overlord prints a new algorithm called warm interference and pretends it is a joke until it is not. A Tau Council adds a clause to a treaty. When possible, breathe first. The Eldar build a path that dodges his future and then take 3 steps on the path because it amuses them to flout their own advice. The Mechanicus publishes a paper with the title Anima Flux, Non-Warp Energetics in a Null Regime, and dedicates it to the unnamed teachers of breath. He does not see these things. He doesn't need to. He knows the shape of answers by now. He goes where the alarms stack and the prayers trip and the plans need weight. He lifts. He sets down. He carries. He refuses to carry what would turn him into an idol. He keeps receipts. He reads them at night. He keeps going. And on Sanctis Ferrum, under a sky that does not deserve beauty and holds it anyway, a child traces the double-headed bird, draws a circle over their heart, flicks 2 fingers up like a secret handshake learned from a mural and a rumor, and turns to their friend with the absolute certainty granted to 9-year-olds. "When I'm big," the child says, "I'll punch lightly, and hard when you must," the friend says gravely. They practice breathing. The city breathes with them. The galaxy turns. He answers.